Coach Brandon here. Today we'll be talking about the hierarchy of nutrition, specifically referring to body composition change. Now, if you've ever been somebody that asks yourself, what do I start with when wanting to lose or gain weight, this is going to be the topic for you. And the first and foremost, the most important aspect of body composition change is actually going to be calories. So the first one we'll put up here, calories. First thing we have to find out is going to be your total daily energy expenditure. Now, your total daily energy expenditure is just how many calories you burn throughout the day. And we have to first find that to actually be able to manipulate it in the body composition change direction you want to go in. So to find that, we have to first understand actually that total daily energy expenditure is made up of 4 different components: exercise activity thermogenesis, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the thermic effect of feeding, and lastly, basal metabolic rate, or BMR. And basal metabolic rate is just how many calories you burn without accounting for physical activity. And that is going to be the biggest calorie expenditure of the 4 different components. And we're going to go ahead and try to find our BMR. There's a few different ways to do so. There's a series of different equations online that will actually give a pretty good estimate for the most part. And there's also more objective ways, such as bod pods and body analysis scales, and things of that nature that look at body fat percentage, total lean body mass, and things of that nature that give a really good estimate on BMR. Now for me, my personal BMR is going to be about 2,000. Now to find my total daily energy expenditure from this number, I'm going to multiply that by anywhere from 1.2 to 1.9 depending upon the daily activity levels. So if you're somebody that lives more of a sedentary lifestyle, you'll likely be on the lower end, around 1.2. And if you're somebody that works a very physically rigorous job and also trains frequently, you'll likely be on the higher end of 1.9. Me, I'm somewhere in the middle, likely a little bit on the higher end, so I'll be 1.7, and this equals 4,000. Now I have my total daily energy expenditure. That's how many calories I burn throughout the day just being myself. Now I'm going to have to manipulate that to either be in a deficit or surplus to lose or gain weight. Now let's say my goal is to lose about a pound of fat per week, so I have to be in a 500 calorie deficit per day. By the end of the week, that's 3,500 calories equals a pound. So my daily calorie goal is going to be 3,500. 3,500 calories a day will lead to a 1 pound body fat loss per week ideally, but keep in mind there's always a bit of trial and error when setting an appropriate calorie goal. You can never find a perfect calorie amount right off the bat. That's pretty rare. You will have to weigh in daily and find out how your body reacts to that calorie amount by the end of the week. Sometimes you'll only lose a quarter to a half pound by the end of the week, which tells us we're not in a large enough deficit to accomplish our goals. Or maybe you lose 2.5 pounds. Maybe you're in too large of a deficit. So make sure that we monitor that first week or two and manipulate things if needed. This is always subject to change. We're not just going to pick this number and run with it for a month hoping for the best. Instead, subject to change, we're going to make sure that we actually come up with an appropriate amount by changing it if needed. Now the second most important thing to consider is going to be macronutrients. When it comes to macronutrients, there's three of them that's talked about at least: carbs, fats, and protein. Now, I'm going to mostly talk about protein because that is a very commonly deficient aspect of macronutrients, and there's a lot of weird ideas behind it. A lot of individuals think about half your body weight in grams will be a good protein amount, and very many people are deficient in it and also don't consider the idea of protein quality. But for me, you can't go wrong with a gram per pound of lean body mass. So for me, for example, I'm 200 pounds of lean body mass out of my total body weight of about 220. So my goal would be around 200 grams. But more recent studies have shown that higher amounts are actually far better for both weight loss and weight gain. So my goal may be something closer to 220 grams per day, but it doesn't stop there. I also have to consider protein quality. If most of your protein is coming from plant sources, nuts, wheat gluten, things of that nature, you may need to have a goal much higher than 220 to actually get the needed amount of amino acids that 200 grams of protein would actually elicit. So most of your protein should come from eggs, should come from poultry, beef, things of that nature that have really good amino acid profiles. Carbs and fat also have a lot of considerations. Different genders, for example, male and female. Female are going to need more fat. When it comes to carbohydrates, we very much have to consider the actual processing of them, and also kind of the glycemic index scale considerations are very important as well, but we're not going to dive too deep into that today. We're mostly just going to talk about the hierarchy and what we should look at first and last. Now, the third most important aspect is going to be micronutrients. Micronutrients are very important for daily body function as well as longevity, but they're not the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to body composition change, nor are they the most important. But micronutrients still very important. I'll refer a lot to iron because that's the most common micronutrient deficiency in the entire world, but there's a lot of considerations to be made, especially for men and women. Women need something closer to 16 milligrams of iron per day, which is a lofty goal, and men need somewhere closer to 7 or 8 milligrams per day, which is a large difference. That's why most women are very deficient in iron, which you will feel if you train consistently. It'll come in the effect of extreme or increased fatigue, low energy, and a series of other side effects that indicate you are low on iron. Vitamin D3, another really common deficiency. So there's a number of different micronutrients that people are very commonly deficient in, and the best way to find out if you're deficient in something is just a good old-fashioned blood test, which is something that's becoming more of a standard of care in America, which I love because I personally believe that every few months, everybody, doesn't matter who you are, what your goals, should do a blood test to find out what you're deficient in. That's really the only objective way to find out. But you can also go with the easier method of tracking your daily food that you eat on MyFitnessPal or whatever tracker that you're using, and look at the micronutrient section to see if you're deficient in something. Though, like I said, there's more objective ways like blood work because there's some additional considerations of micronutrients. Let's say you're hitting your goal in iron, for example. You're a woman between the age of 12 and 50, and you have that 16 milligram, that lofty goal of iron per day, and you're hitting it. You're doing a good job, but you still feel the effects of a deficiency. Well, that may be because all of your iron is coming from plant sources, and plant sources aren't nearly as bioavailable as animal sources. So there's other little considerations like that to be made as well, which is why blood work is the best way to find out if you have a micronutrient deficiency. Now, fourth is going to be nutrient timing. Nutrient timing, the first thing that comes to mind for me, along with many of you out there likely, is going to be intermittent fasting, which is really big right now and for a good reason. There's lots of great studies behind it showing its validity, but there's also other more moderate versions of nutrient timing, just like the anabolic window that's talked about all the time, that hour-ish, 2 or 3 hours is widely debatable, a period of time where a combination of high-quality protein and carbohydrates is good to take to have better recovery, along with a series of other positive effects. There's also factors such as carbohydrates are really good for nutrient timing as well. In a 3-hour post-workout window, it's a great time. Your body handles carbohydrates best, especially ones that are a little higher on the glycemic index scale. So there's also certain times we can schedule certain macronutrients to have the best effects on our body in terms of nutrient timing. Now, fifth, the last one, but some people's first, is going to be supplements. So subs are just that. They're supplements. You're supplementing your nutrition with them. They are not first. They're not the first thing we consider. Far too often, when you see a decent-looking physique, a dude with a decent-looking physique, or whoever it may be, walk up to him and say, "Hey, bro, what kind of supplements you on?" No, you should be saying, what kind of calories are you on? What kind of macronutrient ratio are you going with? How are you making sure you're not deficient in micronutrients? Supplements are great. They play they're very, very important for certain people. For example, if I am in this 500 calorie deficit per day, it may be hard to get my needed protein goal. So in that scenario, it's going to be good to supplement with some protein. There's also some timing factors with supplements. So for example, before bed, having a casein protein, a longer digesting protein, will keep me in an anabolic state as I sleep. So there are certain supplements. Another few would be omega-3 fish oil or vitamin D3, some supplements that you pretty much need to have for optimal health, because vitamin D3, for example, we live in Portland, Oregon, you're not going to get very good sunlight exposure for about 8 months out of the year. Fish oil is another one. Unless you're having fish 3 to 4 times a week, you're not going to get optimal omega-3 levels, which is good for a number of different factors, including cognitive function. So supplements do have a time and place, but keep in mind they're just supplementing your nutrition. They shouldn't be the first thing we consider. Now, the last aspect I would just throw in here is the actual process of food, the process that your food goes through, probably going to be in the 3 to 4, likely 4 area in terms of importance, because the process of food actually determines how our body responds to it. So, for example, ultra-processed foods do not stimulate our PYY satiety hormone or ghrelin, the hunger hormone, in the same way that non-processed foods do. So you can take advantage of this if you're trying to be in a deficit deficit and you're trying to control certain factors of hunger and satiety, you should probably eat foods that are less processed. And on the reverse end of things, if you're having troubles being in a calorie surplus, it's likely a good idea to maybe add in a little more ultra-processed food. So there are some good things to consider in terms of processed food as well, but this is going to be a list for now. Very good to consider when trying to change body composition. Start with the first, end with the last, do it in order. Let me know if you have any questions. Give it a try.